Hi, I'm Mimi, and welcome to my sewing studio. This is a part two of a three video series that I'm doing. It's called Sewing 101, and it's really the basics and the essentials for people who have not yet started sewing yet and they don't know where to start. And today we are going to get to know the sewing machine. I know that you're going to have a different kind of sewing machine than me, but rest assured, if you know how to thread and use one kind of sewing machine, then you typically know how to use all other sewing machines. They all function the same way. There might be slight differences, but you basically they're basically the same. Yeah, we'll get to know what the stitches do, what are the most used stitches, and just practice that, and also how to thread the machine. So let's get started. The thing that will be different on most sewing machines is one or the other. It's either you have a bobbin or a metal bobbin case or a no. There's ones without the bobbin case where you put the bobbin directly on the top. This is one with a metal bobbin case. I prefer this one. I'm just kind of old school. I know some people prefer not dealing with the bobbin case, but this is a metal bobbin case. We'll talk more about the bobbin after we thread the machine. Okay, so that's the one thing that will be different in different machines. And all sewing machines will have a light switch, and it's also usually functions as a power switch. This one has it here. They're all over the place in home machines, so you just kind of have to look for it. Um, and when the light's on, that means the machine is also on, and that if you press the pedal, it's gonna go. But even when the machine is plugged in, to the outlet and everything's hooked up, if that switch is not on and the light's not on, then it's not going to turn on. It's a safety measure I've noticed on most sewing machines that are for home. I want to talk a little bit about what typically machines come with, especially when you buy a new machine. I don't know if you have an old machine, then you might have these parts, but generally there are needles, replacement needles. Most machines nowadays will come with this is a zipper foot. I actually use this. I actually don't use these two. Usually a machine will come with a zipper foot, but sometimes they come with extra feet. This is a buttonhole foot. I don't use this for buttonholes, but apparently in the instructions you can do corded buttonholes, which could be interesting. Maybe I'll do a tutorial on that when I figure that out. And this is an edge finisher foot. And I've never used it. It looks too complicated for me, but we'll see. And you will most likely have some empty bobbin spools. The bobbin is what makes the stitch on the underside when you are sewing. So there's two sets of there's a top stitch and then a bottom stitch that link together, and this is the bottom spool called the bobbin. And if you need to remove your needle this way, then usually it'll come with a screwdriver to, replace the needle or put the needle in and tighten. And a lot of sewing machines will come with a seam ripper, but I never use this. This is too tiny for me. Like the handle needs to be bigger, but sometimes they come with that. You will need to wind your bobbins before starting to sew. So I will show you how to do that. When you're ready to wind the bobbin, put your spool on, and you want to put the thread through this tension because that's what's going to keep your wound bobbin nice and tight, because you don't want a loosely wound thread of spool or spool of thread. Ooh, backwards. And usually now I notice that bobbins now have a hole in them because this makes the winding process so much easier. Before, you can get ones without holes, and that's a pain because then you have to like guess which way it's spinning. But thread through the hole of the bobbin from the inside out. Okay, so then it's spooling onto, oops, that one went out, onto the spool and not another way. So see, so you want to start in with this vertical spool part and then have the tail coming out of it. You stick it on there, and then usually, I think most home machines have like the sliding mechanism to keep that spool on there. And some sewing machines, I love this feature, is they have like a disengage. So that means that the hand wheel is not going to move, and it's not going to move the needle up and down, which is nice because then you can wind the bobbin without unthreading your machine, which is nice. Or another thing I do is on my industrial machine, and you can do this with a home sewing machine too, is that you just unthread the needle. So there's no thread. If the needle's going up and down, then the thread's not going to get all tangled up in there. Okay. So now you disengage, you lock this in, hold on to the tail, and you're going to just press the pedal like you are sewing, and you just want to hold on to the thread until you have enough, a good amount, where it's not going to get unthreaded. And then you can just clip this like that. And then I like to hold on to the thread because sometimes it flies off of there. So just hold on to that and just go fast. Oh no. Okay. Well, I guess I have to get more thread. So, yep, that's done. Usually it stops by itself because it's full. This kind of measures it for you. And one thing I want to mention is that the thread needs to go in between the two discs, not under here. Okay, so between these two. Okay, there's a spring under here to keep that tension going. Okay, I want to take a little more time with the different settings because I think that's the most, confusing thing when you're first beginning to sew. These two are the spool pins. You put the thread here. There's two because, you can really do either one, but this one is for the one you mainly use to thread through the machine, and this one is for when you're winding the bobbin, which we will go over a little later. But honestly, it really doesn't matter which one, but for the purpose of following the rules and the instructions, we'll put the main thread there. This is the tension. So what happens is we're going to thread this thread over here. No, it goes through, yeah. And there is a disc in there that pinches the thread. So either it's going to pinch harder or lighter. So that's how you control that. Usually you don't need to mess with this and put it in a middle setting. It goes all the way up to 9. So I would say about 3. What is it? I had it at 3, but you can somewhere between 3 and 4, honestly. And so the higher the number, the more it pinches. So tighter the tension, and looser the number, the less it is. So you can just if you have it at the lowest tension, then you can really just pull the thread and you'll feel no resistance. And if you have higher tension, then you'll feel the resistance as if you had it threaded and you pulled it. But generally, you do not need to mess with this as a beginner. Here are the different, see how there's letters here? And then these are the settings to select the stitches. Stitch selector. Yes, that's a better way to describe it. Generally, okay, you do not need to really worry about the other stitches, especially when you're starting, except for straight stitch, which is A, and the zigzag stitch here, which is C. Yeah, this is the stitch length, so that's going to tell you, or that's going to let you select the length of your stitches, like when you're sewing, like how long, when is the needle going to go in, up, and then go in. So it's the space between the two stitches. You really don't need to mess with that. I just keep it at 2.5. That's always the standard 2.5 stitch length. I will go over a little bit about what these stitches mean, but generally you just need to worry about the straight stitch and the zigzag stitch. The straight stitch, you know, that's your typical sewing stitch, and the zigzag is if you want to uh, finish the edges, like the raw edges of the fabric so it doesn't ravel. Or you can use it also for like stretchy fabrics and all of that. But these are also, if you're working with knits, then you're a little bit more advanced. So the instruction manuals will always tell you how to use these stitches. This one's pretty cool, this stitch right here, because it's for knitted fabrics, and then it stitches, it sews, and it finishes the edge at the same time, which is kind of cool. I like that stitch because this is like how you know, do the seam, and then these little lines kind of finish off the edge for you, which I kind of like. These are the buttonhole settings. So again, that's a whole nother video. So don't worry about that, but you can make buttonholes with, actually, I want to say all sewing machines, because every sewing machine that I've, of course, why wouldn't they? You need buttons. Let's see here. Yeah, so basically, if you want to select, say, the zigzag stitch, you're at A, then you just go, ta-da, and that's it. If you wanted to, but just to show you how this works, if you want, say, let's say this G, but orange, you want to, am I turning it this right way? Yeah, no, this way. You want to do this, see, that's orange, stitch selector, and then you want to do the G, and that's how you get these bottom stitches. You set it on this setting and then pick the letter that is above that one, that stitch. Okay? I know that was kind of a lot, but like I said, I rarely use any other stitches besides the straight stitch and the zigzag stitch. Okay, so let's thread the machine. You wanna, if you have a thread, spool of thread that has more than one hole, always put it in the center hole, because you don't ever want to put it on like this, because then it's not going to spin around in a perfect circle, and then you're going to have just like a knotted mess. So always put that in the middle. And some sewing machines will have an extra step here to put the thread through. It'll be super self-explanatory, so do that if you have something like that. This is for the bobbin, so do not put your sewing thread through there. I'll talk about the bobbin and winding the bobbin a little later. You want to first put it through, all sewing machines will have this, where you will put it through here and then put it through the tension, and then you loop it back up and put it into the, what is this, it is called the thread take-up lever. Yes, that's what it's called. So then you want to put it through here. You don't have to thread it through. There's always an opening in the back. So you just put it through like that. To show a close-up of this, because see, it comes through from this side and then it goes to this side. And there is an opening in the back. See, you just slide it under there. Okay. Okay, after you thread the thread here, through here, you want to bring it down here, and see how there's an arrow? You're going to go up. Most sewing machines will have arrows, and it'll be really self-explanatory, but all sewing machines make this sort of like U shape. So before you thread it up to the lever, the thread lever, you want to make sure that it's up, because sometimes it's, you know, hidden in there. And with the hand wheel, you always want to spin that towards you, never backwards, always towards you. Okay. I think what happens is like the synchronicity of the needle and the bobbin hook it needs to go spin only one way for it to be always synced, or else you're going to have like a knotted mess again in the bobbin or something. So always move this forward towards you, and move it, spin it towards you until this lever is up all the way, and then you thread through, make that U shape, and then There's always a slot in the back. You're never going to have to like thread that little eye. That would be a pain. So always just slide it through the back and back down. And mine has a little bit of a hook. There's going to be usually 2 series of hooks by the needle to keep that thread where it needs to be. Mine has up here, and then there's usually one by the needle somewhere, and that's usually different on machines. Mine has both on both sides. Here, I'll show you closer. See, there's a hook here, and you just put it through there, and then I have 2. You can't see the other one very well. I have 2. Because this is what's holding my needle in, it's in the way of that, I always put it through the one on the left side. See? Because that one's just hard. I'm like, who gets it there? I guess you can thread it through there, but this is easier. So yeah. All right. Then it's time to thread the needle. Yay, the fun part. I know a lot of machines have those like automatic needle threaders. Those have never worked for me. I've had a couple machines in the past that had those threaders, and it was like a hit or miss, and it was just easier for me to just thread the needle by myself. I mean, it always go, and you thread it from the front to back. So let's see here. Yep. You could always move your hand wheel if your needle is too low to thread. See, you can always move it. And yep, there you go. So now that's threaded. And now it's time to thread the bobbin. A little note on the needle, because if you bought a new sewing machine, it's probably not going to have the needle already in. So usually you can have a hand, there's usually either a screwdriver that you need, or this one you can do it by hand, which is kind of nice. And when you look at the needle, you're going to have a flat side and then a round side. With home machines, that flat side always is in the back. And actually, with home machines, you can't actually put it in backwards, because that flat side is a safety mechanism where you're forced to put the needle in the correct way. But the flat side is always in the back. And you can move your hand wheel to raise it. And remember, always move it forward towards you. And lift that part up as high as you can, and then put that needle in there and tighten it as much as you can. And I think that's what that screwdriver is for, because you don't want that needle coming out when you're sewing. I mean, I feel like I need a bigger one than this, but just get that as tight as possible. Okay. Okay, like I said, with the bobbin, there's 2 different ways that you are going to access it. This is just one of the ways. And that's the unlocking lever. We'll call it the lever. And it can only go one way, because see, there's a little notch in there for that little arm, that piece that sticks out. So it can only go one way. Okay, and this is how you get it out. Okay. Now you take a threaded bobbin spool. Let's see here. This is the bobbin spool. I already have the thread in it. And the main thing to know about how to put this into here, it goes a certain way. It has to go this way, or else you're not going to be able to sew. I'm holding it, and see, when I pull it, it spins clockwise. It kind of goes, see how this little arm goes to my right, angle towards the right. That's the way your thread should come off of the bobbin spool, like this. See? Okay. Then you flip this over. This is where this is where the bobbin spool goes in, and you hold it and you put it into like this. Okay? Then you see this little slot here? That is where the thread's going to go in, and then it goes under that, this piece, and then it goes in between. The thread needs to be in between. See how, ooh, let's see. Just want to make sure that you see. It goes right there, and see how there's like little hooks almost, like right there. It's a slot, like a tiny slot. That's where it feeds through, like this. Okay? And to test it, you have to make sure that it spins without holding, not holding the back, just holding, just placing this so this doesn't fall out, but not holding it, and make sure that it unspools clean, like without bumps, or it's a good tension and it's smooth. That's what I meant, not clean, but smooth. See? You want to do that test. And it goes, see how it goes right underneath, right there, that thread? That's where it should, the placement is, okay? And it holds it there. This is very important. Okay. Then, keeping the thread, actually you want a little bit more thread than that. Yep. Then keeping it like in like this and keeping the thread, it can just flop around like here. You can put that there. And then you gently place it into the bobbin slot and make sure it clicks. See that click? That's when you know that it's in there, locked in there. Now, this is kind of the fun part. Remember the tail of your top thread? Put it in between your foot, under your foot. Hold it there. Then you spin the wheel, the hand wheel. Remember, I'm not going to zoom out, but spin it towards you. Spin it towards you. So remember, the needle goes down when you do it once round, and then just do it once. And do you see that little thread catching there? It's gonna loop that thread. Okay, so I spun the hand wheel once around towards me, holding onto the tail of the top thread. Okay, so then it's hard to see, but you see how that bottom thread got taken up, right, by the needle, the thread of the needle. Because I was holding onto it, it went there to make a loop, and it caught the bobbin thread tail that was hanging off of here. But now it's coming all through to the top. The thread is now coming through the hole down here. That's the hole that the needle goes down to repeatedly to make a stitch. So now you have 2 threads on the top, okay? And that's threading the machine. I always recommend having both threads under the sewing foot, okay? That's just gonna keep everything out of the way. You want a pretty long, good, generous tail, because as the machine is sewing, if it's too short, then it might get unthreaded and you have to unthread or rethread. So have a good, I don't know, this is about almost 8 inches long tail, okay? So have a good amount, and you're gonna hold on to, I like to hold on to it when I start sewing. So the first stitches they don't get tangled. So after you do that, you close everything up and you are ready to sew. If you saw the first part of this video series, then you might remember me talking about the only thing I don't like about this machine is the small area here in which to sew. So I purchased this, and it was custom made for this machine. This company actually makes it for a lot of different machines, so you can really get this extension for they have a whole list, and it seemed like the list was really long. So check it out if you feel the same way, that your machine doesn't have enough room here. I really like this, and there's this ruler here. I will link you to the site that makes makes these. But so far, I'm really happy with them. Okay, I have the scrap of fabric. It's not that big. Get 2 layers. I feel like 2 layers would be best because you're really sewing together 2 layers of fabric when you're sewing anyway, especially with this straight stitch. And then we can practice zigzag of how to finish um, the seam allowance. So when you are sewing, you always want to put the foot down. This is the presser foot. So you always want to have that down. That's actually easy to forget, especially when you're beginning. And then you're like, and then you have a big tangled mess. But yeah, you always need to sandwich. And sometimes they're back here. This one's on the side, but they're usually here, here, somewhere. And it's just, that needs to be down. As far as these lines, mine has, let's see, 3/8 up to 6/8, and every machine's going to be different. You might have 1/4, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch to 3/4 to 1 inch. It just means that's the width of the seam allowance. And when I say seam allowance, it means the edge of the fabric that's cut to where the stitches are and that width. Mostly though, I use 1/2 inch seam allowance. I know some of the sewing patterns will say 5/8. I find that 5/8 is kind of wide and you end up having to trim. But start at wherever you feel most comfortable. If you want an extra wide seam allowance because you're a beginner, then go for it. Just know that you can also trim it off later if you find that it's too wide. So I'm going to be at, well, it says 4/8 here, but we all know that's 1/2 inch, right? I don't know why they did that. That's kind of funky. Okay, so put your presser foot down, decide your seam allowance. And what I always do, even till this day, because I hate it when you start sewing and then there's like this, it gets tangled immediately. Always have your threads under your foot and off to the back here, okay? And then before I start sewing, I put the needle down because I know that sounds completely tedious, but I have found that I have more success starting the stitches when the needle is down. And I have taught little ones to do that because that also gives you a chance to check if the foot's, that you'll notice that there's a big gap between the presser foot, and the surface of the sewing machine, and it kind of makes you aware that, oh, I have to put the foot down, because you will not believe how often that happens when you're beginning. So put the needle down. This, you're probably already wondering, oh, what's this? This is the back stitch. So when you're stitching, if you don't back stitch, then the threads will come out, it'll separate. So this is a lock stitch. So you always want to do that at the beginning and the end, each time you're sewing like an area. Okay, so let's just start. You just need, I usually count like 3, 3, 3. So 3 forward, 3 back, and then 3, and then go. So let's see. 1, 2, 3. And then you just sew away. So the table that you decide to use on the sewing machine needs to be super sturdy, because I've used kind of flimsy tables before, and then this starts, when you go up to a certain speed, this machine starts bouncing around like crazy. So, and it's very distracting. So make sure you're working on a really sturdy table. Okay, and this is when I'm at the end of the fabric, so you want to back stitch. And then before you undo everything, make sure this is up, needle up, because that's gonna allow it to be, like, you'll see. I'll show you when you don't have it. It's hard to get the thread out, so it'll let the threads be loose. Okay, needle up, and you want to lift the presser foot and then let it, and then there, pull it out, and then a lot of you will have a little razor blade or a little slot on this where the foot is attached to the pole. There will be a slit there where you can just break off the threads, which is a feature I love in most sewing machines that are the home machines, because my industrial machine does not have that, and I wish it did. Yeah, so this is your first stitch. Yay. Okay, so I'm just gonna clip these threads for this the tutorial so they get out of the way. So let's finish this raw edge on the seam allowance. I'm gonna do the zigzag stitch C, but I've also seen people use this stitch. It's more of a decorative stitch, but either stitch will work. Even a straight stitch will work to just make sure that this raw edge doesn't continue to unravel to the seam. So it really is up to you. The most common edge finishing stitch is the zigzag. So we'll start with that. We are going to keep that stitch length the same. Let's see here, C, right? C. Okay, so we'll see what the 2.5, you can shrink it down, make it longer. I'll show you what it looks like with all of them. Okay, so remember, tails under the foot and back, press our foot down, and then needle down. You don't really, I've heard, because I used to do it and then I stopped, but you don't have to backstitch on the zigzag stitch. It kind of creates puckering anyway, so it's not really a functional stitch. It just is, the sole purpose is so that this doesn't unravel through the seam, making a hole. But do whatever you want, honestly. I'm gonna try it without. So see, okay, needle down, and then let's go. Okay. Oh, I have a little blade here too. Why do you know? Okay, so there's two places that I can cut. This one's easier. Okay, here's a zigzag stitch at 2.5 stitch length. Not bad, I like it. What I've also done is when you get close to the edge, watch. It kind of, you can, if you see that there's a hole in the middle of your foot, then you can kind of see where the stitches are going. I'm going to line up the raw edge to the right on the right side of the hole that's there to get that stitch right on the edge and see what that looks like. So hold on to the tails at first here when you're doing zigzag so they don't go anywhere. Okay, then you can let go. And then let's try slightly short stitch length. And then let's try slightly longer. Okay, so see how right out the edge, it finishes that edge off. You can do this too. This is totally fine. But I like sometimes to go, I like to go right at the edge sometimes. But it does kind of, see how it kind of puckers here? Yeah, so you might want to stick in the middle, second thought. See, this is too tight because it's too short, because now it's like really making that fabric curve, and you don't want that. And this might be too long. I don't know. I guess you can use that, but actually the longer thread works better if you're going to be stitching so close to the edge, I think, because it's looser. But I think this would be the best way here. Then you still have, you don't have to worry about all the tension and if it's puckering the fabric or not. It's at 2.5 length. See, just stick to what works. Sometimes I'm trying to veer off track and I'm like, oh, actually it was better the way I was doing it. Okay, so there you go. This is a zigzag stitch. Let's try the other one and see what that does, okay? I'm gonna do straight stitch again. Okay. I have another straight stitch here, but you'll see the line, it moves. Let's do it. it moves the needle to the left. And that's if you want like 1/8 of an inch more, I guess, or if you're using the foot, I guess if you want like a 1/4 inch, then you can move that needle, 1/4 inch seam allowance, that is. That's pretty skinny seam allowance. Then you want to move that needle over there and then just use the edge of the foot as your guide. But today I'm going to just go here. Stick to what we know, right? That works. Okay, so 1/2 inch seam allowance, tail back, foot down, needle down, 2.5, check all your settings. Okay. Okay, if you ever want to turn a corner, actually that's the next tutorial because we want to make pillowcases as our first project because they're super easy and fun to make. So if you ever want to turn a corner, needle down, lift up the foot, put the foot down. There you go. So you turn the corner. So keep the needle down so then you can pivot. All right, so let's try this stitch. G. Okay. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, did you see that the needle went down or to the left? There, I mean, I guess you can use this if you want. There we have it. I feel like this might be better if it's less of a stitch length. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's better when you shorten the stitch. Thanks for watching. I know that was a lot of information and kind of a long video, longer than I expected. But just remember it's trial and error. There's always a manual. And comment below if you have any questions or if you have a machine that, I don't know, seems different than the one that I was showing you. Stay tuned for the last part of the Sewing 101 videos. It's going to be our first project. It will be a pillowcase. So something that you can use and really easy to sew. And it has all the basic things that make up a sewing project. So I hope you stick around for that. And yeah, see you next time.